Events. So we've been working with events, mainly with our buttons. So we'll make a button and we'll usually say, okay, on click, we're going to do some function, or we're going to call some function and a bunch of code's going to happen. So this is called an event, something you do to an element. You can click on it, you could double click, you could hover over it, you could, all types of events. Then there's a list in the actual Canvas page there below. You can add events to anything. So for example, I could add a on-click events to this div that I have. This nice green little box right here. However, I'm going to show you an even better way to kind of add events to your HTML elements using JavaScript. And you might not know why we're doing this, but I'll show you in like 2 minutes, so just stick with me. So here I have a div with an ID. So let's write some JavaScript. So I want to link to this div. So I'll say box elements. I like to use the elements because it lets me know this variable is controlling an HTML element. Then I'm going to use the get element by ID. And the ID of this box is, or the ID of this div is just box. All right, so let's say I wanted to make a function that simply changed the color of this box, because right now it's just green. So I could make a function called change color. And this function, let's keep it simple. All I want to do is change the background color of this box element div. So of this element. Well, this is my variable that is linking to that element. So I could go box element dot style dot background color equals green. So when this function is called, it should successfully change the background color of this. Well, I guess it's already green. Let's make it like blue or something, sure. So the trick is, well, how do we call this function strictly from this div? And the answer is, well, we can add an event listener to this HTML element. And normally we would add it here. We would say, well, on click, but I'm going to show you a new way because it's better. So I've got a variable that is linking to this HTML element. So I'm going to use that variable, box element dot add event listener. Now I'm not quite done. I need two things inside this pair of empty brackets. The first thing in quotations is what type of event you're trying to create. So a lot of events are activated through clicking. So click is a very popular event. So let's just use that to begin with. In quotations, and the second thing separated by a comma, well, is what function you want to call. Well, I want to call this function. That's why I made the function. So I'm going to go change color. What this has done is added, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. Add event listener. I've added an event to my HTML element, and I've given it some parameters here. I can click on this element and I can activate the function now. So if I save this and go to my div, if I click on it, you'll see that it's changed color. So really the exact same thing as going div on click and calling my function here. So why don't we do that? Because that was pretty easy. Well, the thing is, if you want to do the old method of adding an on click and typing in the function here, you're stuck with that function. You can only add one event doing it in line like this, which is fine in some cases. But sometimes you might want multiple event listeners on some type of element. So for example, I could click on that HTML element, But I could add another event listener for, let's say, a double click. And that is the proper writing there to specify you're going to create a double click event. So what I could do is I could make another function called change color to, and I could have two functions waiting for two separate events to happen. And instead of changing the background color to blue, I could maybe change the background color to red, for example. So now this HTML element through JavaScript has two types of events that we can do on it. I can click on this box to activate the first function, or I can double click to activate this second function we've created. Just like that. So I got two functions working on the same, or two events that are working on the same elements, which may come in handy in the future here. Now, just because we're talking about these add event listeners, I guess I could, let's talk about it now. So these are all mouse events, things we do with our mouse, clicking, double clicking. You can hover with your mouse, mouse down, mouse up, whatever. But we've got a lovely keyboard that we haven't really done anything with. And keyboard's actually kind of easy, because a keyboard you don't really need to link to anything. You don't really, because you're not like clicking on a specific element, like you're just using your keyboard. So if you want to use your keyboard to do anything, all you do is you use the window keyword. You don't have to set anything up. You just go window, and it's the exact same thing. We're going to add an event listener, and we need two things in these brackets. So the first thing is, well, what type of event is it going to be? 99% of the time you're using a keyboard, you're going to use the key down event. That's basically saying, okay, you push a key and the key has pressed down, and that's the event. And I need a function. Not the best function names I'm coming up with, although they are following proper syntax with the capital name. So you can see that this has not been defined yet. That's why it's the color that it is. So I'll go change color 3. And I guess this is probably the only tricky part about using keyboards. Inside these brackets, you need to go events. And we don't really need to get into too much detail about why we do that. But the reason you need to put event there is because you need to check, what key press has been, like what keyboard button are you pressing? And anytime you're trying to check something, it's probably a good idea to use an if statement. So inside this if statement, you can check which keyboard button has been pressed. So for example, if I was interested in them hitting the enter key, these are my old slides. Aren't you lucky you don't have to read slides anymore? I'll put this on canvas too. Here is your each keyboard button on your keyboard has a specific ID, I guess you could call. So for example, if you wanted to detect someone pressing the enter button, you'd use the key code 13. Or spacebar, you use the key code 32. So that'll be on canvas. I don't remember these at all. I always have to check. For some of you who've done C# coding, this is going to look a bit familiar. So you're going to go event.keycode. And I'm not getting the IntelliSense, which is freaking me out a little bit, but that's okay. And what did I do? I wanted enter, so enter was 13. So if they've pressed the enter button, what do I want to do? Well, how about I just change the background color of my div So now that div has 3 events that can happen to it. Well, 3 style changes. I guess the event is happening to the window here, so it's not related. And sure enough, if I press enter, my div turns black. So I can click on my div to turn it blue. I can double click to turn it red. I can press enter to turn it black. So that is the beauty of using add event listeners. You can add whatever you want, however many you want, to any type of element. Plus, oops, semicolon. Plus, now we know how to detect key presses and do things on our website according to what key has been pressed. So a bit of a long video, but I think a very helpful one, and one that you'll find much use for moving forward.